In the waning days of the 5th century, the Roman Empire, a colossus that once straddled the known world, stood as a mere shadow of its former glory. This was an empire that had, at its zenith, defined the pinnacle of human civilization, law, and culture. Yet, in these twilight years, it was beset by a myriad of crises that heralded its impending doom. The once invincible city of Rome, the heart of the empire, now lay beleaguered. The streets that had echoed with the triumphs of Caesars were now filled with the whispers of despair and uncertainty. The grandeur of its architecture and the splendor of its public spaces belied an underlying decay, both physical and moral. Aqueducts, the lifelines that once nourished the city, were falling into disrepair, symbolizing the crumbling infrastructure of an overstretched empire. Politically, the empire was a shell of its former self. The Senate, once the cornerstone of Roman political life, had become a puppet in the hands of powerful generals and emperors who ruled with an iron fist. Corruption was rampant, and the rule of law gave way to the rule of might. The empire was fragmented, with its vast territories increasingly difficult to govern from the center. Economic troubles further exacerbated the situation. The empire's wealth, built on conquest and tribute, was dwindling. The once prosperous economy was now strangling under the heavy burden of taxation, inflation, and a labor system heavily reliant on slavery. This economic decay eroded the very foundation of Roman society. Amidst this turmoil, two figures stood in stark contrast to each other. On one side was Romulus Augustulus, the last emperor of the Western Roman Empire. Young and inexperienced, he was more a symbol than a sovereign. Ascending to the throne in a time of unprecedented crisis, he was ill-equipped to handle the immense challenges of his empire. His power, largely ceremonial, was overshadowed by military strongmen and advisors. Romulus was a ruler in name only, a puppet manipulated by those who wielded real power behind the scenes. On the other side was Odoacer, a man of a different breed. A chieftain of the Germanic tribes, he was a formidable presence in the Roman military. Unlike the young emperor, Odoacer was a seasoned warrior, hardened by battle and shrewd in the art of war and politics. He epitomized the external threats that the empire faced. Once a servant of Rome, now its potential usurper. Odoacer's rise from a mercenary to a kingmaker reflected the changing dynamics of power within the crumbling empire. In this age of decline, the stage was set for a dramatic climax. Rome, a city that had once commanded the world with its legions, now faced its greatest challenge, not from a foreign enemy, but from its own internal rot and a shifting world order that it could no longer control. The story of Romulus Augustulus and Odoacer was not just the tale of two individuals, but a saga that encapsulated the end of an era and the beginning of a new epoch in the annals of history. As the 5th century dawned, the Roman Empire, once an unassailable fortress of power and stability, found itself besieged by burgeoning crises. The greatest of these were the relentless pressures exerted by various barbarian tribes at its borders. These tribes, once held at bay by the might of Roman legions, now sensed the weakening resolve and diminished capacity of their formidable adversary. The Visigoths, Ostrogoths, Vandals, and others, each with their own ambitions and grievances, pressed against Rome's frontiers. Raids into Roman territories became more frequent and devastating. The sacking of Rome by the Visigoths in 410 AD, a mere 66 years prior, had already shattered the myth of the Eternal City's invincibility. Now, these incursions were not just sporadic acts of plunder, but concerted efforts to carve out kingdoms from the dying carcass of the empire. Within the vast expanse of Rome's dominions, a palpable sense of decline was evident. Provinces that had once proudly borne the standard of the eagle were slipping from Rome's grasp. Britain, Gaul, Hispania, distant lands where Roman law and culture had once flourished, were now fragmenting into realms controlled by local chieftains or invading tribes. The central authority of Rome was disintegrating, its edicts and decrees increasingly ignored or defeated in these far-flung regions. In the corridors of power in Rome, leaders grappled desperately with the unfolding catastrophe. Emperors and generals, more concerned with personal power and survival, often engaged in short-sighted measures. Political alliances were made and broken. Usurpers rose and fell with startling rapidity. These leaders, while striving to wield the remnants of Roman authority, were often incapable or unwilling to address the underlying causes of the empire's malaise. The Roman military, once the empire's pride and the backbone of its power, was a shadow of its former self. The legions, stretched thin and often underfunded, struggled to defend the empire's extensive borders. Increasingly, Rome relied on mercenaries, like Odoacer, to bolster its ranks. These mercenaries, though fierce warriors, were loyal not to Rome but to their commanders or their own interests. This shift was indicative of the changing nature of the empire, from a system based on loyalty and shared ideals to one driven by necessity and expediency. Odoacer, a product of this era, epitomized the disillusionment felt by many in the Roman military. A man of barbarian descent serving in the Roman army, he witnessed the empire's decline firsthand. His rising prominence was a sign of the times, a time when the fate of Rome was increasingly decided not by Romans, but by those who once served under its banner, now disillusioned with its failing might. The empire stood at the brink, its centuries of dominance eroding under the weight of external assaults and internal decay. In this volatile mix of waning power and rising ambition, the stage was set for a dramatic and irrevocable change. The Roman Empire, a civilization that had shaped the Western world, was on the cusp of a transformation that would forever alter the course of history. The year was 476 AD, a time of uncertainty and change when the tides of history were poised to turn in a most dramatic fashion. The Roman Empire, once the unchallenged ruler of the Mediterranean world, was about to witness a moment that would forever be etched in the annals of history: the fall of its last emperor, Romulus Augustulus. Odoacer, a man of both ambition and prowess, stood at the forefront of this historic upheaval. A leader among the mercenaries who had once sworn to defend Rome, he now embodied the growing discontent and disillusionment that had festered in the heart of the empire. Sensing the weakening pulse of Roman authority, Odoacer rallied his forces, a mix of Germanic warriors and disenchanted Roman soldiers, and marched towards the heart of the empire, Rome itself. The city, which had withstood sieges and sackings in the past, now faced an adversary from within its own ranks. The Roman legions, drained of their former strength and spirit, could offer little resistance. The gates that had once held back kings and chieftains now opened to a rebellion born from Rome's own bosom. Amidst a tense atmosphere of fear and resignation, Odoacer's forces entered Rome. The streets, lined with the echoes of a glorious past, bore silent witness to this somber procession. The Eternal City, the seat of emperors and the hub of a vast empire, was now the stage for its own denouement. The climax of this historical drama unfolded with the encounter between Odoacer and the young emperor, Romulus Augustulus. Romulus, named after the legendary founder of Rome, was but a teenager, unprepared and unable to stem the tide of history that surged against him. In a poignant symbol of the end of an era, Romulus was stripped of his power, his crown, and his title. The dethroning was more than a mere political act. It was a symbolic end to a lineage of rulers that stretched back centuries. In the aftermath of this bloodless coup, Odoacer proclaimed himself the ruler of Italy. This declaration was not just a change of guard. It marked the end of Roman rule over the Western Empire. Odoacer, a barbarian in the eyes of the Romans, did not claim the title of emperor, instead opting for the title of king. This shift signified a profound change in the political landscape of Europe. The era of the Roman emperors was over, and a new order was about to begin. The fall of Romulus Augustulus and the rise of Odoacer were more than mere events. They were the harbingers of a new age. The Roman Empire, which had shaped the Western world for centuries, was no more. In its place, a fragmented and diverse set of kingdoms would rise, each carving out their destiny in the wake of Rome's collapse. The drama and significance of this moment lay not just in the fall of a city or the end of a dynasty, but in the closing of one of history's great chapters and the uncertain dawn of another. In the wake of the fall of Romulus Augustulus and the ascension of Odoacer, the Roman Empire, or what remained of it, was engulfed in a period of profound transformation and uncertainty. The immediate aftermath of this monumental shift was felt both within the walls of Rome and across the vast territories that had once proudly flown the Roman standard. Within Rome, the reaction of the populace to the dethroning of their emperor was a complex tapestry of fear, resignation, and for some, a cautious acceptance. Centuries of Roman rule had ingrained in them a sense of imperial destiny, but the continuous decline had eroded the pride and confidence they once held. The fall of their emperor was not just a political shock, it was a psychological blow to the Roman identity. Many Romans grieved the loss of their empire, while others, weary of years of decline and instability, saw in Odoacer a potential source of stability, albeit under a radically different regime. Beyond the immediate shock, there was a palpable sense of void, a power vacuum left by the collapse of Roman authority. The empire that had once exercised undisputed control over the Mediterranean basin was no more, and in its absence, a new geopolitical landscape began to take shape. This power vacuum accelerated the fragmentation of the Western Roman Empire into various barbarian kingdoms. Regions that were once integral parts of the Roman world now became the domains of Gothic, Vandal, and Frankish rulers, among others. These groups, some former allies or mercenaries of Rome, and others long-standing adversaries, seized upon the opportunity to carve out their own territories. In places like Gaul, Hispania, and North Africa, local leaders and tribal chieftains asserted their independence, often filling the void left by the retreating Roman administration. These new kingdoms were diverse in their governance and culture, reflecting the various barbarian traditions of their rulers. The political landscape of Europe was being redrawn, not with the pen of Roman bureaucrats, but by the swords of barbarian kings. This period also saw the rise of new centers of power and influence. Cities and regions that had once looked to Rome for leadership now sought to chart their own courses. The Christian Church, which had been spreading throughout the empire, found new opportunities in this power vacuum. Bishops and church leaders, particularly in the Western territories, took on roles that went beyond the spiritual, often becoming key figures in maintaining social order and continuity amidst the chaos. The immediate aftermath of the fall of Rome was a time of great upheaval, but also of significant transformation. The old order had fallen, and in its place, a new, more fragmented, but dynamic Europe was emerging. The historical significance of this period lay not only in the end of an empire, but in the seeds of the modern nation-states that were being sown in its ashes. The fall of Rome in 476 AD was a watershed moment in European history, marking the definitive end of ancient history and ushering in the era known as the Middle Ages. This transition was not merely a chronological marker, it represented a fundamental transformation in the social, political, and cultural fabric of Europe. The collapse of the Western Roman Empire symbolized the end of the classical period of Greco-Roman traditions. The centralized, bureaucratically managed empire gave way to a patchwork of smaller, often warring kingdoms. The Middle Ages, or the medieval period, was characterized by a significant shift in power dynamics. Where Rome had centralized authority, the new era saw the diffusion of power across various regional entities. Feudalism emerged as the dominant social and economic system, defined by a hierarchy of lords, vassals, and serfs, a stark contrast to the Roman system of citizenship and rights. The power vacuum left by Rome's fall led to the fragmentation of Europe. The once unified Roman provinces evolved into a mosaic of kingdoms, duchies, and principalities. These new states were often governed by local strongmen or tribal leaders who established their authority based on military might and land ownership. This decentralized system, known as feudalism, was markedly different from the Roman administrative system and laid the groundwork for the political organization of Europe for centuries to come. The feudal system also changed the nature of warfare and governance. Loyalty and military service became the currency of power, replacing the Roman model of a professional standing army and a civilian government. The fall of Rome precipitated a shift in cultural and intellectual life. The focus moved from the classical learning and urban-centric culture of the Roman period to a more rural-based agrarian society. This transition saw the decline of urban centers and a decrease in literacy and scholarly pursuits. The Christian Church, which had gradually spread throughout the Roman Empire, emerged as a unifying and dominant institution. As the central authority of Rome diminished, the Church stepped into the void, offering stability and continuity. Monasteries and bishops played key roles not just in spiritual matters, but also in education, healthcare, and welfare. The Church's rise also influenced art, literature, and philosophy, steering them away from classical pagan themes towards Christian-centric subjects. This shift had a profound impact on European cultural identity, guiding it towards a distinctly Christian-oriented worldview. The long-term significance of the fall of the Roman Empire was thus multifaceted. It reshaped the political landscape of Europe, setting the stage for the modern nation-state system. Culturally, it marked a transition to a new epoch that would see the fusion of Greco-Roman legacies with Germanic and Christian traditions. Societally, it facilitated the rise of feudalism and the dominance of the Church, two institutions that would profoundly shape medieval Europe. The fall of Rome, therefore, was not just the end of an empire. It was the beginning of a new chapter in the story of Europe, one that laid the foundations for much of its subsequent history. The fall of the Roman Empire, a momentous event in the tapestry of history, set in motion a series of changes that would profoundly influence the trajectory of European civilization. Its legacy, both in the immediate aftermath and over the ensuing centuries, has left indelible marks on the political, cultural, and social landscape of Europe. The fragmentation of the Roman Empire laid the groundwork for the rise of the modern nation-state. The decentralized feudal systems that emerged in the wake of Rome's fall gradually evolved into more centralized forms of governance, setting the stage for the Renaissance, the Reformation, and eventually, the nation-states of modern Europe. The political theories and practices of the Roman Republic and Empire, including concepts of law, citizenship, and governance, continued to influence European thought leaders. These ideas would resurface and be reinterpreted in the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, shaping the democratic and legal systems we see in Europe today. Despite the decline in classical learning following Rome's fall, the legacy of Roman culture, language, and law endured. Latin remained the lingua franca of educated Europe for centuries, and Roman law formed the basis of legal systems in many European countries. The architectural and engineering feats of the Romans, such as roads, aqueducts, and monumental buildings, continued to inspire awe and influenced architectural styles and urban planning in subsequent centuries. Rome's legacy transcended the political and cultural realms, embedding itself in the collective memory and identity of Europe. The concept of a united Europe, as seen in various historical attempts at unification, from the Holy Roman Empire to the European Union, echoes the unity once achieved under Roman rule. The Roman Empire continues to captivate the imagination of people around the world. Its history is studied, its achievements celebrated, and its failures analyzed. The story of Rome, with its themes of rise and fall, power and hubris, innovation and decay, resonates through the ages, offering lessons and warnings for contemporary societies. In conclusion, the fall of the Roman Empire was not merely the end of a historical era. It was a catalyst for transformation across Europe. Its legacy is multifaceted, influencing the development of modern political systems, contributing to the cultural and intellectual heritage of Europe, and continuing to shape the European collective consciousness. Rome, in its grandeur and decline, serves as a reminder of the transient nature of power and the enduring impact of civilization on the course of human history.